All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's instructional video on poetry. So we are looking at the forms and conventions surrounding poetry, sort of these rules that everyone has agreed on what makes a good poem, how do we define poetry versus other things. So this is just a quick crash course. If you need extra detail on any component in this, or if you just want to hear Miss Johnson vent about how much she loves poetry, you can find those in a list of like extra resources towards the bottom of this module. Let's go ahead and get started though. So during this crash course, I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible. No promises. But we're going to talk about the conventions of poetry, sort of the rules for what makes a poem, these ideas about what makes a poem that everyone's kind of agreed on. We're going to look at rhyme schemes, which is an important skill you need to have. So if you need extra practice, go to it. But how we find out what a rhyme scheme is and how do we sort of identify that pattern. We're also going to look at figurative language. When people say things that they don't mean literally, how do we identify it? What are the names of the kinds of figurative language we'll see in poetry? And how do we analyze and appreciate that? And then I will vent about why we even bother with poetry, why people even bother writing it. So when we are looking at the conventions for poetry, poetry, you can kind of visualize when you're looking at it on a page, a lot of times it stays towards the left. There's a lot of blank space towards the right most of the time. The reason for this is because when you are writing poetry, the poet has the liberty, the freedom to break a line and go ahead, hit enter, and push it to the next. Now, this can kind of change the pace at which a reader reads the poem. It can kind of emphasize the important things. But wherever the line ends and goes to the next, so like here, there's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out. Those are line breaks. So there's a line break between that and wants. Now, some poems have rules about like a certain number of words or syllables before you have a line break, but a lot of times this is up to the poet on where to break a line. If you're writing free verse, it's kind of wherever it feels right. Now, if you look at this poem, Bluebird by Charles Bukowski, you can kind of notice that it looks like it's broken up into a set of 4 paragraphs. But in poetry, we don't call these paragraphs, we call them stanzas. So Bluebird's broken into 4 stanzas. When it comes to grammar, this is one of the main genres where you are allowed to break the rules. When you're writing an article or a short story, you need to have capitalization and proper spelling and punctuation in the right places. But in poetry, the punctuation and the capitalization are, again, more based on how you feel than what the actual grammar should be. Now, still spell things correctly so that we actually know what you're trying to say. But again, a lot of poetry you're going to find is based on what feels right to the poet, because poetry, in my opinion, is mostly about how you feel. Right? We only write about it when we're really feeling strongly about something. So, really quickly, I want to give you a chance to tell me what a line break is, and then find an example of a line break in this poem. Tell me which 2 words there is a line break between. And then I also want you to tell me how many stanzas this poem has. So hopefully you told me that a line break is wherever the line cuts and goes to the next one. And there's an example between first and who, between attention and to, between things and will. This is where the author or the poet just hit enter and then they pushed it to the next line. There's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stanzas, 5 little like paragraph looking things in this poem. All right. Really quick, we're going to look at rhyme schemes. So poems can rhyme or they don't. I don't write poetry that rhymes because I hate rhyming. It's hard for me. Those are called free verse poems. But when they do rhyme, we can identify and describe the rhyme scheme, that pattern of rhyming, by using letters to represent lines that rhyme with each other. So if 2 lines have the same letter at the end when you've written a rhyme scheme, it means they rhyme with each other. Now, if there's a new ending sound, a new rhyme, a new kind of word to rhyme with, then we use a different letter. Now, rhyming makes things easy to remember. Oh no, it's the bell. But it can also make it difficult to come up with the poem because making up those rhymes can be really hard. All right. So when we are looking at identifying a rhyme scheme, so with this poem that we have over here to the right, piping down the valleys wild, piping songs of pleasant glee. On a cloud I saw a child, and he laughing said to me. When we're looking at those first 4 lines, wild is the first ending word we have. So it's going to get the first letter in the alphabet, A. But when we come to the next line, there's a different sound, glee, and those two don't rhyme. So we're not going to give glee A. We're going to give it a different letter. So they go to the next one, B. On a cloud I saw a child. Now, this does rhyme with that first line. So when wild and child rhyme, we're going to give them both the same letter. Since wild has A already, we'll give this line A. Then when we come to the next line, and he laughing said to me, that rhymes with glee, so we're going to give it a B. Now, when you're going forward with everything, sorry, my fun jazz just turned into an ad. When we're going forward with everything, our next line has a completely new sound. So it's not going to get A or B, it's going to get the next letter, C. So I piped with merry cheer, doesn't rhyme with it, so it gets the next letter, D. Piper piped that song again, doesn't rhyme with anything we've had so far, E. So I piped, he went to hear. This does rhyme with cheer, so it gets that same letter, D. Drop thy pipe, thy happy pipe, not a sound we've heard of before, F. Sing thy songs of happy cheer. Now that does rhyme with here, so it gets the same letter, D. We end up with this rhyme scheme that kind of describes, and then people can mimic this pattern. So we have A, B, C, D, E, D, F, D. So we know there are 3 lines that are going to rhyme with each other. Now, this is important because on your test for this lesson that you take on at the end of lesson 7, I'm going to ask you to identify the rhyme scheme for a series of lines. So make sure you understand this. We're also going to get another chance to do this by looking at this quick poem called Lodged by Robert Frost. So this poem says, the rain to the wind said, you push and I'll pelt. They so smote the garden bed that the flowers actually knelt and lay lodged, though not dead. I know how the flowers felt. Now, when we're looking at this, we are going to start with what letter? A, because we haven't heard this sound before. Now, when we look at that next line, pelt and said don't rhyme. So we need to give pelt a new letter. We give it the next one in the alphabet, B. But when we look at the last letter, the last word of the next line, bed, it does rhyme with said. So what letter are we going to give it? A. Remember, rhyming lines will get the same letter. That the flowers actually knelt. Knelt and pelt work, so they get the same letter, B. And lay lodged, though not dead. Said, bed, dead, all rhyme, A. I know how the flowers felt. Rhymes with knelt and pelt, so it gets a B. This means that Robert Frost's poem Lodged has an A-B-A-B pattern. Now, when we look at the entire poem, it's A-B-A-B-A-B. Pretty easy, right? When we look at this one, you're hopefully familiar with. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. I want you to tell me what rhyme scheme this has. Take a minute to think, and then I want you to tell me what the rhyme scheme is here. Identify that pattern, write it out for me. So, since we have star, R, we know those are all going to get the same letter. Because star is our first ending sound, our first rhyme, those all get A. So A. High doesn't rhyme with star or R though, so it gets the next letter in the alphabet, B. Sky does rhyme with high, so it also gets a B. And then we're back to star and R, so we go right back to that A. Now, some poems, especially longer ones that have more rhymes, are going to end up having a really complicated rhyme scheme. You might even get to the letter F. But a lot of times, poets like to stick to A, B, and then the next stanza has C, D, C, D. It's a very popular rhyme scheme. So I think I'm going to cut that video here. You can go ahead and move on to the next part of this crash course in poetry, where we're going to look a little bit at free verse. These are some of my favorite ones. If you are interested, you can always pause and read them because poetry is just incredible and I love it. Okay, see you in the next video.